This is Ben Allen, founder of BC Allen Publishing Group and Tonic Books, a partnership publishing house. We made this interview for you. Why? Because it is our mission to usher into existence the world's next great wave of life-changing, world-altering books. One of those books could be inside you right now, and no writer can go from idea to bestseller alone. No writer has to. Be sure to check out the other resources we've created for aspiring and established authors and the dozens of interviews we've done with some of the world's best, brightest, and most successful New York Times bestselling authors, world-impacting movement builders, and influencers that reach millions of lives. Do enjoy. So I'm here with Joe Mechlinski, who I'm absolutely excited to interview. Joe, you've written an extraordinary book. I know that you're working on another extraordinary book, which we're going to talk a lot about today. And you also have built you've built an amazing business. You've worked, you've developed nonprofits. Like you've just got your energy in all kinds of incredible directions. And I hope that we get to all of that stuff in the short period of time that we have here today. So yeah, welcome aboard. And I'm going to read your bio here.
Yeah, cool, man. I'm looking forward to it.
Great. So Joe is a New York Times bestselling author, engaging speaker, CEO of Shift, and avid community activist. He has deep-rooted passion for helping to build company cultures based on mission, strategy, and growth, regardless of economic or industrial circumstances. He believes in creating cultures where the best talent will seek out opportunities with the best places to work, because when you create something that attracts talent, the talent will stay. His team at Shift embodies the all-in attitude Joe lives by. Shift is a collective of 4 distinct and powerful businesses centered around a mission to shift the work world to transform the real world. They include Shift Consulting, Shift Recruiting, Shift Society, and Shift Ventures. For Shift and Joe, the realization of this mission means creating a more engaged workforce. Awesome, man. I absolutely love it. And I'm super excited to talk with you.
Cool, man.
Yeah. So tell me, first of all, let's just talk a little bit about Grow Regardless and, where did that come from? What was the sort of impetus for that?
Pain, darkness, destruction, despair. It's one
That's
of these
the perfect writer story, right?
It is. And I'll tell you, as someone who had never really totally, fell into being like, I would label myself a creative. I really didn't ever put 2 and 2 together. My mom was an aspiring actress, very spiritual. Growing up, I loved art. I played music most of my childhood. I was never like a good drawer, but I got into writing and doing some poems from time to time. All things I never remembered until really kind of going through one of the hardest professional moments of my life in 2008. We, like lots of businesses, kind of ran into the wall head first as many times as we possibly could. We lost a ton of dough. We had to almost, bankrupt the business. And I remember kind of having those, that seminal moment of we're going to figure this out regardless. And if not, no one's ever going to claim we didn't try our best, our hardest. It was my first year of marriage. It was just there's a lot that I go into in the book. And about 3 years after all of that happened, from 2009 to 2012, we just did the work. We didn't focus on the future. We didn't look back. Every day we got present in the moment, and we got really good at learning and listening, and we honed our craft, we honed our skill. And then in 2012, I looked up and I was like, we did it. We bounced, it just happened. And then someone said to me, you got to put this in a book. I'm like, look, I got a 400 on my verbal, my SAT. I don't know how to read well. I'm ADD. I'm really good at speaking. And they're like, no, you got to check this out. You can speak the book, you can transcribe. So we can get into all that stuff. But the bottom line is,
yeah, that's great.
The book was written from work that had taken place. It was a book totally written from my heart. I hope that when people read it, they get a sense of, really bringing kind of humanity and heart back to business, and just understanding that if I can do this, anyone can. That's really the net of it, which is not to beat our chest about how amazing we are, but it was more of hey, if we can pull this off, anybody can.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And that comes through too in your personal story and your personal background, which, people will get access and insight to. And by reading the book, it makes that even more. It's just such a, it really is a very human book. It's beautiful. It's got business, really practical, useful, intelligent, brilliant advice. And then it's got a heart. Like you said, the book kind of encapsulates what you want to do with your or what you're kind of suggesting to do with companies as well.
Yeah, well, look, I think we spend so much time at work and business. And, I heard a guy named Naveen Jain speak recently. He's got a new company called Viome. I think like his last company he sold for $32 billion. He was in
Wow.
India. And he talks about this often, him and Peter Diamandis from Singularity, about, how it used to be like the king and queen ruled the land, and then it was like sovereign states and governments, and, they took care of our needs. And now we're at a point in time where, certainly there are a lot of people struggling. I don't mean to suggest things are like perfect for all. And, business is really starting to put itself in a position to become the next hero, the thing that solves the world's biggest problems. And if you go all the way down a click deeper into like, we work and we get to work, and my parents had to work. Not that I'm independently wealthy and will never have to work again, but like it was different. The unemployment rate is at like 4%. The amount of job openings are so many, we don't even know how to count that high. I mean, the amount of opportunity that exists sits in front of us, and it's like, what if we just changed the way we thought about all this stuff, that work was truly a weapon to be our best selves, that you could actually raise up and say, gosh, maybe the single greatest lever of human potential, if we're going to spend all of our time there, is a more engaged workforce, like is business. Like we could legitimately fix things, and you see it. We didn't invent this concept. I mean, you talked about Raj earlier today and conscious capitalism and all these folks way before us. We were not the first ones to say this stuff. And, what I love about our work is, we get to meet a lot of really great companies, but then, candidly, we learn from all of them, and we get a chance to do it to ourselves. So it's a complete selfish and selfless endeavor that we've embarked on here. And it's we're just incredibly fortunate.
Yeah, it's great. And so the EQ method or methodology that you develop in the book, is that's stuff that you kind of went through on your own? You kind of found out as you were working on the business?
Yeah,
like
I mean,
2009, 2008, yeah.
Yeah, if you read like Value, Supply Chain, Work, I mean, again, we're not the first person that said the relationships between, shareholders, executives, management, frontline staff, and clients matter. Like, the stakeholder mindset from Conscious Capitalism also talks a little bit about this.
Yeah.
But I think we said it during a period of history that was hard. And, you just think about it, like, when we all don't have access to enough, we tend to look, it's genetic in our DNA to go, well, if there's not enough food, I've got to grab it from me. But it's funny, in this next book that I've put together here, I find that not only is that not true, the book, Origins of Species that Darwin wrote, he mentioned survival of the fittest twice. He mentioned love, cooperation, and compassion 95 times.
Wow, that's really cool. I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, the reason that a mother won't eat her young if there's not enough food is because we're just as selfless as we are selfish. Wow. And we think about capitalism, and I'm a huge fan of the free market when it's free, and it's not. And when we get it there, yeah, like let's do that. But maybe the game isn't I beat you and you beat me. It's that we keep the game going. And there's another really great book that was just written called Infinite and Finite Games by James Carse. I know Google makes a lot of their folks read this book. Simon Sinek's been talking about it. And it's the same thing. It's how do you keep the game going? And I think that's the impetus for the EQ growth methodology was, how do you treat your employees like your clients and your clients like employees? Like, how does Southwest, how does Starbucks, how does Chick-fil-A, how do like the best run companies, why do they have the best customer service? And like, is it an algorithm? Is it artificial intelligence behind the scenes? Or wait a minute, I'm sorry, is it timeless principles of like the platinum rule? Not doing to others as you would have done to you, but how they want to be treated. Like, this is basic stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good, but it's still important and valuable to be talking about. So many people, and this comes from conscious capitalism, so many people, I think, have this skepticism about business that it's just about profit. And something that your book really helps to bring to the forefront is like, actually it can be about, like you just said, like helping to transform communities and like helping to change lives and like connecting human beings around a common purpose, or as you call it, like a story in some ways.
Well, look, I mean, money and mission are not mutually exclusive.
Right.
Not my opinion. People and purpose and planet over, profits and pride and prejudice. Maybe it's both. And I think that's back to just the way in which human beings think about things as a zero sum. But what if it's not zero sum? What if it's duality? What if I'm everything and nothing at the same time? What if, not to get too Zen on you, but
I love it. It's great.
That's the way to think about it from my perspective. And, and in business, so often we're focused on. I mean, look, if your CFO or your CEO says, look, it's all about the numbers and the profit, that's great, but they're just guardians, gatekeepers, and the police. They're not innovators. They're not leaders. They're not, really thinking about the inputs that create those outputs. Look, anybody can look at a spreadsheet. I mean, there was a recent article, I think it was in TechCrunch, that talked about how AI is going to replace the traditional CEO because it's risk management cases. Well, yeah. I mean, so for every entrepreneur that's listening to this right now, like, get with it. It's not just the factory worker that's going to have a robot doing your job. Like, if you don't use, I was at Singularity this year, and there was a woman who talked about, there are 3 skill sets that no matter what happens, you will be not marketable, but needed in the future of the workplace. And she said, it's like creativity. And in my book, I talk about how, creativity really stems from innovation in the mind. It's in the head. It's where you choose to focus on. That's how the brain in the head works. And then she said, you need empathy. Like, how many times do we need to hear that? Like, the ability to connect, put ourselves in other people's shoes. Well, I talk often in Shift the Work about how this is the heart brain. It really, like, legitimately is not just like the metaphor of the heart. It is the heart brain. It is biochemical. It's oxytocin coming out of your heart. And then the last I love is courage, like the ability and willingness to fail. Like, you think about what this country was founded on, you think about this whole entrepreneurial movement of like, try something and fail. Yeah, well, maybe we should stop calling it fail. I mean, my dad has an interesting saying. It's not entirely, it just depends on how you think about the world, but he says, he's like, forever's a long time and nothing lasts forever. And, he was applying that to me walking down the aisle, by the way, to get married, which was poor timing by him, but he was sort of making it because he knew it was a head case. But the point is, even like, think about marriage. We're like, oh, you got a divorce, you're a failure. Well, maybe. I mean, the institution was designed when we lived till 35. And I'm not saying we should all get divorced. My point is, like, why not look at that as just part of the journey, right? And so going all the way back to your question just about business, it's like, if you want to win, this next generation of millennials, they already think this way. Like, this isn't just listening. This is a listening exercise. And if you want to win in this environment, it's almost like you have to do it even if you don't. Like, a buddy of mine, Yannick Silva, wrote a book called Evolved Enterprise, and he made a little bit of tongue-in-cheek fun at Kentucky Fried Chicken for putting together a social mission campaign around breast cancer. Like, okay, that's probably a little too far out on a limb. Like, come on, you can't be like Kentucky Fried Chicken killing chickens and talk like, there's probably some incongruency there. But but the point of it is, you better jump on the bandwagon, because if not, it's almost like saying, like, I don't need the internet to make my business work. I mean, said no ever in 2017, but that was not the case in 1999.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. Something that Thibaut, who introduced us, and I'll be interviewing him coming up, he and I talk a lot about in his book is about like this movement-based business. Businesses that really are, they're like, you don't just have a cause that you kind of like latch onto the business, but you've got a cause that's like the heart of the business that really drives the business. And that's what I hear in this. Okay, a couple of things, man. I mean, there's so much more. Part of the problem I'm having with these calls sometimes is like, I have so many questions, and I could just like nerd out with you and talk about business for hours.
Well, dude, it doesn't have to be the first, the last, the only, and I'm good. So keep rocking.
Good. Okay. Good. Well, not just that, but I also want to be sure that we're like, I want to ask you about your writing process, and also the marketing process, and how this next book is coming along and everything like that. So, do you think that when you were saying that those 3 qualities that I forget the name of the woman that you mentioned, but the 3 qualities that we want to cultivate in the current workplace is creativity, empathy, and courage, right? Was it courage? Yeah. Yep. So those 3 things actually, and this is maybe a kind of handy transition, I find are also incredibly valuable in writing a book. And in some ways, authors are like a little mini business. It's like a little solopreneur enterprise. And I think those same 3 qualities are absolutely vital for authors, like empathy and ability to understand and hear hear the needs of your audience, sometimes without them even being there. Right. And then courage about like speaking, like being seen in front of a large group of people and presenting your work and standing behind your work and willing to risk being wrong or criticized. And then, of course, the creativity is self-explanatory. But did those things come in play for you in your writing process? What do you think were some, and if they did, that's awesome. And if they didn't, what were some of the most important aspects or sort of qualities to your own creative process?
So I'll try to answer in this way, which is, we all like music for the most part. And when you think about your favorite artist, they did some of their best work when they were coming from that dark place of got to meet it, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, etc. Like it's always the rise up, right? And you also find that sometimes the art gets diluted when they are living life in a different way with lots of stuff and material and things, and there becomes a fall from grace, and then there's a resurgence, right? When they're like, no, it's not about that stuff, it's about this stuff, and they forget that hunger. It's almost like if you think about Rocky 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? You think about that spiritual journey. I think in some ways, if I were to talk to my earlier, younger self, I would have said a couple things. One, the courage it takes to put yourself out there. I wasn't ready for it until I did it. I would talk a big game, but I was like a scared, cowardly lion. I mean, very courageous in a lot of parts of my life, and relative to putting myself on paper out there, I just wasn't. And so, you got to know too, it's also connected to the biology. You come from fear, you've got too much cortisol in your body, and you will not be able to think creatively or with possibility. So I think you got to be mindful of this. And I think, relative to something, I've gotten a chance to know the founder of TED, Richard Saul Wurman, to a degree. And he tells me, he's a guy who's written 90 books. He's founded one of the biggest movements on the planet with TED. And he said, I never wrote a book I didn't want to read.
Yeah, that's great.
And it's so simple, but even to the point of having empathy for yourself, like first the book has to speak to you, because I think ultimately the reason like an Adele does Hello and this crazy song goes viral, because it is so in sync with her soul and the world music. It's not the best song in the world. It's a little goofy. I mean, I love it, but like it's not my genre. But when I listen to it, I get goosebumps. And the reason is it is like unabated, soulful singing. It is her. And I think that's the courage, or that's the process. So for me, the tactical process was, look, I can't type still. I'm 40 years old. I guess 5 years ago, I didn't know how to type. I like everything in my life typically starts out with, I don't know how to do it. So who does? Go learn from them. I went to a lot of different courses. Truth be told, I would give the biggest credit to all of my work to, Tony Robbins, Brendan Burchard, a lot of the guys who, have done very, very well. But Brendan was a guy who unpacked the process, really made it accessible to me. So, I'd read hundreds of books and never thought about how is a book written? Like chapter 1's usually, why did you write it? What's the story? Chapter 2 is usually, why is it relevant today? Chapter 3 is usually the synopsis. Chapter 4, 5, 6, and 7 are the pieces, and chapter 8's the wrap. And I was like, duh, like I've read hundreds of books and never thought that was a structure.
Nice.
So I spent probably about 6 months learning and rereading books that I loved. I spent time thinking about, like what would be different about my book creatively? Like how would we put not just good philosophy, but process and practice? I thought about, I wanted it to be practical. I also thought there was an opportunity in 2000 and I guess it was 12 and 13 to write a book that didn't say how great we were, but said how much we sucked. And so, once I got clear with that plan in about 6 months, I started the content writing. So what that looked like for me, and I don't know if you want me to get into this much detail.
Yeah, let's hear it. Yeah, I love it. I love hearing people's I'm a bit of a nerd. I mean, I've been teaching writing for so long and working with writers for so long. I kind of nerd out about it, just the way I can nerd out about business. It's fun for me. So yeah, please, let's hear a little bit.
So like, Joseph Campbell, right? The hero's journey. I said to myself, all right, so, I've got the structure of the book. I've got the title, which was inspired by a poem from Tupac Shakur, who's from Baltimore, about how the seed must grow regardless, like in the concrete jungle. And I thought about like, look, I've got a 400 on my verbal on my SAT. If this book's ever going to get big, like this is going to be the biggest joke ever that, I could do this. And so, more or less, I found a writer. I found a transcription service. And I, on Sundays, I would outline chapter 1. On Monday, I would wake up at 4:30. I'm an early riser. I would go to the gym and I would come back. And I'm a very good speaker. I do, a lot of presentations or trainings or facilitations. I mean, it's, 20 years of this. And I know that I can tell a great story back to the hero cycle. So I would tell the story. What's chapter 1 about? I would actually speak it as if I wanted to hear it, as if I wanted to read it. And then I would record it, hit send, get it transcribed, get it back to me. I'd clean it up and I'd send it to the writer. Now she did an amazing job of cleaning up my gibberish and, lack of understanding of the English language and structure and flow. To this day, I still struggle with like reading something and comprehending it. It's like whether it's dyslexia or ADHD, I don't know, but I know it's something. I have a very difficult time with that. And by like Wednesday, she'd kick me back, or Thursday, she'd kick me back her final version. And then I would read it. I'd make notes, send it back to her. And by Saturday, we were wrapped up. And I had set up this process that we were going to do that for 8 weeks.
That's so good. 8 weeks. Yeah. This is important. I love for people to hear this, that you can actually create a book very, very, 8 weeks is really quick. I mean, that's awesome.
Well, look, I had a business to run. I had a family. I'm trying not to be the worst dad and husband ever. I also wanted to, really get my body back in a different shape. I played football in college. I was like, look, I'm doing it all. I'm going to do it all in this 90-day period of time. So I started CrossFit. I was like doing Bikram. I was, just kind of really putting myself in like a learning lab moment. I was doing a lot of clients from a consulting standpoint, and all that was going on. And I also didn't tell a lot of people I was doing this.
Uh-huh. Why? What was that? What was the purpose of that?
Because I also, we were, kind of leaving this world of like 2007 and 8 when we talked a lot. And I don't think we did as much as we talked. And then in 9, 10, and 11, I think we didn't talk at all, and we just did the work. And then I was like, I want to emerge out of that, not pendulum swing all the way back over where we just talk about it and it's not done. And it wasn't, again, about failure. I just thought, gosh, I need to be creatively in a place where I'm not getting input for 3 months. And then when it's done, I want to get feedback because, I'll skip ahead to the story of this time. I decided to write book number 2 about a year and a half ago, and I am still getting feedback. I mean, I did a very different process, which I can share with you, and taking me, 3 times as long, and it's been 3 times as painful. So there's a variety of reasons for that. But I would just say for me, doing a chapter a week got arduous because at the end of it, I had to keep reading chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like when we were on set.
Right.
Not again smart enough to just remember what I wrote the week before. So it ended up lasting a total of 90 days. I fell apart towards the end in terms of like being able to keep up because again, the reading was pressed. And I would say about 10 to 15 hours a week I put into this for 90 days.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. That's amazing, man. And what do you think that this, the book was obviously very successful. It is very successful. It hit the New York Times bestseller list. Do you think that, was there something in that process that you did that lent itself to that, to that kind of success? Was there something in the relationship you had with the writer? Was there something in, what about the book itself? And I know the marketing is an essential part of hitting the list, but what about the book itself do you think, really, really helped its success? Was there something in that process or,
I think, so I picked a couple writers before the one that I picked. I found this one, by the way, on Upwork. So it wasn't like I fired 3 of them coming into this, and I vibed on the one that, Pamela, I mentioned her in the book. She's amazing.
Yeah.
And I take nothing away from her when I say, look, I understand the different varieties of ghostwriting. Like she didn't interview me and write the book.
Right.
She, of course, asked me questions. She, of course, found other notes and sites that I didn't see before. Like we had a very good collaboration. And, she only writes one book at a time, which I think is an essential key for ghostwriters. I think that, I also, we extended the agreement longer than it was because it was the right thing to do. Like, you've got to have, I find a lot of people who meet me and they're like, he wrote a book? I want to write a book. Like my financial advisor and I laugh about this all the time. He knows a lot of the people I do in business. And he's like, dude, the amount of people that meet you and immediately within a week or two are like, dude, I need to write a book. I go, oh, I know. I make it look easy because of my start. I'm not just being, self-deprecating. I'm telling you, I get it. And then they actually have to do it. And part of what I don't, even getting into this much detail, I'm sure I've done it in another podcast or two, but like, it's hard work. I mean, we had to go back to some points. Like, you just got to stick with it. And, by the end of it, it was like, I think we had, don't quote me on the word count. I think there's like, I don't know. I think it's like 35 or 40,000 words. Again, I don't remember exactly. It's like 160, 70 pages.
Yeah,
I got
that seems about right.
I got like a little antsy. Was that enough? Like, and then you get insecure about it and you're not really sure. And like, I was like, you know what? Oh, that's the book. That's it. So that's what the book is. And again, Brendan, had great content. I was part of his mastermind. I was in there with a guy named Garrett J. White, who's become a really big deal on the West Coast. JJ Virgin was in that same group. Steve Lashansky. These are all people I looked up to just from a creative, writing or authorship perspective. And, I got a chance to learn from a lot of really smart people. I mean, if you're not willing to do that, I just think that, it all sounds easy until, it's like Mike Tyson says, until you get punched in the face.
Yeah.
Like just trying to do it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, having mentors, I think, is absolutely essential. I mean, in just about everything, I think that you can burn yourself out just trying to learn how to do the first step of it. Like a lot of people, when they come to me, they've struggled just to even write an outline for like years. So like having somebody there to support you and kind of oversee the process, I think is absolutely incredible.
Well, yeah, and I think there's something a little just nuance that you made me think of. I think you need to limit the number of people you're going to get input from. So I remember sitting down with T-Bone.
Yeah.
A guy was like, awesome. Not that he asked for others. I was like, you shouldn't talk to anyone else but that guy.
Yeah.
Because in this process, I went the opposite direction by a mile. I have like 10 people helping me because I was like, Jim Collins had 24 people that helped him write, Good to Great according to him. It's like, let me try that. Never again.
Yeah. Just too many. It's like the kind of old too many cooks in the kitchen, right? I find that true for writers as well. So because you're going to get different opinions from each one of those people.
And it goes back to something Richard said. Don't do this for anyone else but yourself. Like he said about 10, it was the perfect conference that he always wanted to attend.
Yeah.
And I was like, when you think about that, look, he's like 82 and you're like, oh, he's just being like, a guy at that part of his life. And it's like, no, listen to what he said again.
Yeah.
Every book he ever wrote was for himself.
That's great.
What he would have done. And again, it sounds really common sense or even too simplistic. And I would, as you continue to go out there, you're listening to this, you're like, I'm thinking about writing a book. Look, I think you should, but I also think even before you decide to write the book, you should really think about why. And so everybody's been told you can't make money in books, and that's mostly correct.
Right.
Except if you're going to use it for something else. And so, sometimes it's just art. You need to get it out of you, and that's awesome. Sometimes it's, to help your speaking business, your training business, or your overall business. That's great. If you're going to become a professional writer, you should start following like a Dan Pink who writes 2,500 words a day, or I know Shankman who does, similar sort of exercise in the morning. Like, cool. But just be clear about your intentions, and not because you're not going to become famous writing a book. There's only going to be one J.K. Rowling's. Like, that's just the way it is.
Yeah. It's great. Okay. I love it. A quick comment on that. I'm also noticing the time here. I want to be conscious of your time. So I got a follow-up question for this, and then we can wrap it up. But the idea about writing for yourself, I love that. One of the things that does as well is that you are, in a sense, you can kind of stand in as as almost an avatar or a representative of an audience. Like, you're not a total island where, like, if you're the only person that's going to like it. Like, if it really resonates with you, I imagine it'll resonate with other people, right? So you can kind of put the worry about other people aside if it's really speaking to you. And that's part of what I hear in that, writing the book that you really want to write, or that really speaks to you. And then I've got, so a follow-up or a kind of different direction question here. And I do notice that, and I do want to be conscious of your time, but what is the most important aspect of marketing for you? And we'll end with this quick conversation about that. What's the most important aspect of like getting a book into the world? So you've got the book, you've written it, you've worked with people or a couple of people that can really help you cultivate your message. And then you go to bring the thing into the world. What do you think is most valuable for people to learn about in that?
Well, I think so I would just go through kind of, I saw Roger Hamilton, who's a kind of a big deal community guy. He talks about the STAR method, which is answer these questions, which is, so what am I getting with the purchase of the book? And so what you'll see is people have, really overdone, but in a good way, bonus offers. So I get it and I get what else?
Mm-hmm.
You know, Vaynerchuk, Chris Brogan did that back in 2010 and 11, and it became like the new standard. I mean, Dan and G. Heath do it. You know, Dan Pink does it. Like professional authors give you something else besides just the book.
Yeah.
I think you need to think about that. I think the other piece is why. Like, so why does this matter? Like, why is this going to add up to something bigger? And I think, you know, sometimes people pull stunts like 24-hour webinars. I was just in a meeting. We were talking about doing something like that. I was like, oh, you know, look, Richard Branson was the king of stunts, right? And there is something to be said about getting to the front page of the paper in terms of like, why does your book matter? Like, is it going to cure cancer? Is it going to create a movement? Like, what's the big claim?
Yeah.
I think part of the claim or the reason why will actually inform your marketing tactics. So look, in Grow Regardless, I said, let's put 100,000 people back to work. So I sent the book to every member of Congress.
Wow.
500. Why?
I love that. That's great.
You need to be thoughtful about, you know, I did it on my dime, by the way. So it was like, I sent it. And then I said to any business professor, if you want 1 year's worth of books, just ask me and I will give it to you.
Wow.
Like back to like trying to take a little bit of a longer term. And then we did, you know, other tactics, but it all started with why. And then it's like, okay, how am I going to pull this off? Because there's a logistical, you know, part of this. It's if you're self-publishing, that's one piece.
Right.
Morgan, to plug them. David Hancock was amazing for us. 57 literary agents and publishers told me no.
Wow.
In fact, in writing the second book, I went back to look at some of their feedback. I mean, it was like not even just no. And it wasn't even the book proposal stage. I wrote the book. All they had on Amazon, and they were like, worst book ever read. Like, I'm not kidding.
Wow.
I'm not proud. I'm unfortunately not big enough of a person to tell you that I didn't send the book after it hit the list to some of these folks. I'm not a good enough person to be that good. But like, yes, of course. But the how part of it is like, again, like, you know, what's the social piece of it? You know, today it's gotten so much trickier. There's 35,000 books published every year, at least in my category.
Yes.
So the numbers you say, it's like, you got to figure out why. And I also heard a stat once, I don't know if it's true, but like 20% of the people that buy a book read a book. So if you really said you want to affect like 1 million people, then that means like 20 million need to buy it, right? Or 5 million people need to buy it. And then think about where. So, you know this probably much better than I do, but most people are buying everything off of Amazon. I mean, you can claim to like Barnes & Noble and Books A Million, but I don't know the numbers personally, but I'm just guessing that, you know, Amazon does a really nice job with Amazon fulfillment. And again, you know, your publishers can put you in bookstores, but that's consignment. No one, you know, walking into a bookstore to look for your particular book, like no one's browsing to stumble upon your book.
Yeah.
And so the romanticism, the sentimental moment of like walking into Barnes & Noble and getting your book, look, I did it. And we had to buy back a shitload of books because they didn't sell in like, you know, weird places, you know, because I don't have a presence and a platform there. You know, and then look, you know, I think ultimately, you know, your current platform, the who, is, you know, it's look, we have corporate clients. I'm in a very advantageous position. You know, a lot of our clients have multi-thousand person organizations. We have amazing trusted advisor-like relationships. And we did a couple programs where, you know, if they gave us their client list, we would do the fulfillment and they bought a bunch of books for their clients. We had, you know, I featured companies in the book, which by the way, they bought books for their employees.
That's great.
I had testimonials in the book because I wanted people to feel like they were part of it. So a lot of people who gave us testimonials also bought the book. So look, those were little small things, but like, I think it's, you know, kind of the what, the why, the how, the where, and the who. I think that's a decent framework to take and just try to work out how do you see the book launching. But, you know, comes all the way back to like, what do you really want?
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. It's so good. Man, I could keep asking you tons of questions. I want to be conscious of your time here, though, and just thank you so much for not only the work that you produce in the world, but your energy and your attitude, your discipline as a student and as a teacher. I mean, really, just it's always a pleasure when I talk with you, man. I feel like I'm just getting so much out of it. So yeah, thanks a lot for everything you're doing. And on the way I like to end these is if there was one piece of advice, like a little soundbite that you could give to aspiring, even or established authors who are looking to make a big impact with their book, what would that be? And it might be something we've already talked about, or it might be something that you're present to right now.
So I had one of my businesses is a membership group, and they recently did an event, an experience with Tebow's wife, Lola.
Hmm.
And I wasn't there, unfortunately, but it was this really amazingly transformative experience. So to give her a huge plug for the Movement Lab here. But she gave a quote during the day, and it has like totally stuck with me, and it so applies to this, which is, and again, I apologize for not knowing who said it, but it's too amazing not to share. And she said something along the lines of, how you do anything is how you do everything.
Nice.
And so when you think about your rest of your life, your book is only going to be a reflection of that. And so the reason I went through this whole transformation personally was I was like, look, I want to be an amazing dad, amazing husband. I want to have it all. I want to use my body as a weapon throughout the day. I want to have a different level. Like, in order for this book to be amazing, for me, I needed to transform everything, because I was convinced that the way those words showed up would be the way I was showing up. And so for me, again, that quote, I think, is kind of an interesting, that would have been super amazing to have back then, just as a nice reminder.
That's so good. Yeah, awesome, man. Well, thank you so much. And I'm going to be looking forward to your book, which comes out by March 1st. Is that right?
We are hoping comes out by March 1st. Shift the Work, yes, is going to be the book, and very excited about that. I appreciate you pushing it out. And
absolutely, man. If it's anything like the last one, it's going to be awesome, and it's going to really impact a lot of lives. So, yeah, thank you so much for all the work you do.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
If you want more interviews like this, check us out at tonicbooks.online. In addition to other resources, we've made dozens of interviews like this to support aspiring and established authors who want to write, publish, and market their book with ease and impact. For more details, check out the description below.